All right, so this is part 3 of our Plan for 2025 series. If you didn't see the first and second one, I will pop them up at the end of the show. But guys, we always get started with a trade. Scott, 12-team Superflex PPR 1.75 for the tight end start 10. Are you going Brock Bowers or Dalton Kincaid, Garrett Wilson, and a 27 first? Go ahead, man.
So we got Bowers on one side. He's probably a top 15 startup pick. Somebody will take him there and build around the elite tight end. You're getting a first. You're getting a 27 first. I can sell somebody that's Jeremiah Smith, even though it's a 1 out of 12 chance and probably not going to be the team that tanks for the 101. I get Garrett Wilson. He's still a top 12 receiver. You might not think he's as good as you wanted him to be, but he's still a very good receiver. Comes down to how does the league value Kincaid? How do you value Kincaid? Is he just pure hopium? Can I still move him for something else of value? Because I think if he counts and I could then maybe flip him for something I like more, another need, an upgrade somewhere. Can I get another 2027 first for Kincaid if I tack on a third, something like that? Like if I can get more creative, let's say I could turn this into Bowers in a second for Garrett Wilson and 2 firsts. That just comes down to that's probably a fair price for a single player, no matter who it is. But do you want to trade Brock Bowers? And if the answer is I'm open to it, I could squint and see where this could be maybe the package. You're going to never get a better offer then. So I'm still taking Bowers. But if you had a plan and you said, I really want to make this happen, I want to cash in on the best chip that I have, I don't blame you. This is not a terrible starting offer.
Shane, 12-team Superflex, PPR, 1.75 for the tight end, start 10. Which side are you taking, man? Brock Bowers or Dalton Kincaid, Garrett Wilson, and a 27 first?
So let me ask you this. Do you think you could trade Dalton Kincaid and a 27 first for George Kittle?
Yes.
Then I would do that deal and get George Kittle and Garrett Wilson. But
do you think so, Scott? Do you think that trade could happen? Dalton Kincaid and the 27 first?
I would make that trade. I would make that trade in January if I'm giving George Kittle, just because over the next 8 months, I'd rather have the other pieces. Now, in the midst of George Kittle being the best tight end in fantasy in the middle of the season, then you probably don't get that deal done, but we're way far away from that. So, yeah, I think that's a deal you could definitely get done. I wouldn't want to use these assets that way. Kittle and Garrett Wilson, I don't think that gets it done for Brock Bowers. So there's some transitive arguments here that...
No, I don't give a about that. What I'm saying is, can I get someone that scores as well as Brock Bowers? Actually, outscored him this year. Obviously, Brock Bowers is a rookie, so you expect that trajectory to continue up. But I know for a fact George Kittle is an absolute monster, right? The only thing I was concerned about in the past was his injury issues, and that's me knocking on wood. He seemingly put them behind him. So I say that now. Next year, he'll come out and blow his pinky toe out immediately. But you know what I mean? Like if you wanted to stack assets, that's something that you could think about doing there. Now, in a vacuum, guns to my face, shotgun to my brain, we obviously expect him to improve upon what he did as a rookie. And as a rookie in 1.75, he was probably a top 10 wide receiver.
Just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just ridiculous. Scott, you mentioned how it comes down to what does the league think about Dalton Kincaid? What do you think about Dalton Kincaid? And let's try to tie it back into a popular show of ours, the likability show. Does he have any likability? What are your thoughts on Kincaid?
I mean, I don't want to invoke the Kyle Pitts argument, but Kyle Pitts had 1,000 yards as a rookie. Dalton Kincaid didn't. He had, 700? Something like that. It's not close to Kyle Pitts. And then year 2, where people expanded the projection on him, right? Like they don't have any other receivers. Stephon Diggs is gone. Dalton Kincaid should increase in production by 20-30%. And he's not even better than at least 2 receivers on his own team. He's by far not a focal point in the offense. His production went down 20% this year. And he missed a couple games because he was injured. So you're kind of looking at him like, what was he coming in as a prospect? An old 23-year-old non-productive college tight end that people only valued because he went to the Bills and they were going to make him their number 1 receiver. None of those are true. So, I mean, does he still have some value that he's holding on to because he was a first-round pick and he's still tied to a good offense? Yeah. But I don't think the dynasty days where people go, oh, he'll break out this year. Don't worry. I'll still give you a 28 first, a 27 first. Like that doesn't happen. People don't do that anymore unless you find the one manager that knows something or thinks they know something where they're just willing to be convicted on Dalton Kincaid. So I think he's just a downward moving asset that I don't think people really cared for until he was a first round pick to the Bills. That was the selling point. And now we're 2 years removed from those things and they don't really matter. And so does he have some ADV? Sure. Like, I think there's still a world where he finishes as a top 8 tight end next year.
Definitely.
But I don't think he's an asset anymore. I think he's more in the range of, oh, I can have that guy as my starting tight end, and he keeps up with the Joneses for everybody that doesn't have the top 2 or 3 guys. But I don't want to pay for that, right? I feel like I can find that guy at tight end 20 prices, and I can still get tight end 12 out of that guy instead of paying tight end 7, 8, 9 for Kincaid because of where he was a couple years ago. So I don't think he has much value. I think you have to have a plan if you trade for him. To Shane's point, sure, if you want to flip him for production, fine. If you want to try to get another first or tack on to something and get a better tight end, you just have to have a plan if you have him. You don't just invest in him because, oh, he was a first-round pick and he's on the Bills. Clearly, those things don't matter anymore.
Shane, in a 1.75 tight end premium, assume our start 10, 12-team Superflex, would you take Dalton Kincaid or the 201?
I'm just trying to do math. What is 7.9, but in a 1.75 tight end premium? That gets you about 10 points per game, probably.
He had 44 catches, Shane, and he played 13 games. So gives you about 3.5 catches a game times 1.75. You basically give him another 2.25 points per game.
So
ain't great. So about barely 10 a game.
So
10 points a
game.
10. Yeah. 10 points a game. Yeah, I'll just take the pick. Now, I think you could probably do better than that, though. I think you could, because he is, a young tight end. I don't know why I'm air quoting that. Both of those things are true. He is a young tight end. People thought he was ascending after his first year. What's funny is Scott was talking about him. I'm just looking up his stats. He actually saw his target share go up 3% and his targets per route run go up by 9% last year. So it wasn't even a work thing. It's just that he's not. I don't want to say he's not good. He wasn't gooder this year with more opportunity, which is never a good thing, right? If you get more opportunity and you don't capitalize on it, I'm a little concerned for you. So yeah, I would trade him for the 201. I think you could get more, but I don't know, because I don't have much Dalton Kincaid, to be honest with you.
And I think if you've done any mock drafts, I know we've done some on DD, but like if you're doing mock drafts, I think a lot of people, if we put these polls up in the community, the tight end 2 in the class are Dalton Kincaid, and people were forced to take the tight end 2, they'd take the tight end 2. And they may not even know who it is, but the thought that they could just get the pick, and the fact that you may not have to pick the tight end 2 at the 201, you might get a running back or a receiver that you like or a quarterback that falls. It just feels like that flexibility.
So part 1 was quarterbacks. Part 2 was running backs. This is tight ends. Again, it's early. But as of today, Scott, how are you looking at the tight end position going into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of where it gets interesting, because that same question, the 201 is a very mundane, I don't know what I'm doing with the 201 in this league versus that league versus this league versus that league. We have no clue how the drafts are going to go right now. But I think the first question you have to ask is, and I'll even ask Shane, without even looking at last year's production, how many tight ends right now would you consider to be true assets that if you have them as your starter, you are locking them into, I know I'm getting production that is going to be a little better than the league median, meaning I'm going to be outpacing most of my opponents on an average basis with these tight ends? How many would you say? And then I'll tell you kind of what it looked like in 2024.
I'm probably undershooting it, but I can think of 5. That's about what I can think of.
I mean, if you really want to make a cutoff being 20% better than the next tier, it was 5. And one of those guys was Jonnu Smith, who came from outside the top 20. So there, it tells you that, okay, one of the 5 was a guy that clearly could be completely off the radar right now. And then guys that weren't even in the top 15, TJ Hawkinson, I know he's coming off an injury, but he didn't exactly crush people when he came back, right? Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, Jake Ferguson. All these guys were outside the top 15, and they were all comfortably inside the top 10 to start the season. So even some of the ones we think, that player, there's no way they're going to fall outside the top 10, like Mark Andrews or Sam Laporta. What if they do? What if they fall back a little bit? So I'm just asking, how many tight ends are actually assets? And maybe this is where we get into some of the likability. You may not consider them to be an asset, but I bet you your league still thinks Sam Laporta is a very good asset.
100%.
So is he a guy you could flip for a first? Probably. You probably couldn't flip Pat Freiermuth for a first or Dallas Goddert for a first.
No.
But if you told me I have a 60-40 shot of having the same production between the three, then I probably would take the one I can get for free. I wouldn't want to pay the 201. So I think it's just who are the haves and who are the have-nots, and where does the market intersect with that? I would probably put it, McBride, Bowers, Kittle. I mean, Njoku was up there, but there's a lot of questions with who the hell their offense and how it's going to run.
It's not going to be Deshaun Watson.
Liquidity. He's got
There's going to be. It's not going to be Deshaun Watson, so that's all that matters because he balls with everyone else at quarterback.
And I'd probably bet that Andrews and Kelce somehow manage to stay in the top 10 if they're alive. Meaning, like, they've done it year after year after year after year after year. They probably can get you 10 to 12 points per game in this format, maybe more. Outside of that, it seems like it's the wild, wild west. So I think it's very interesting to see how the rookie tight ends are going to be valued. But I think more interestingly, it's who are the guys that still hold. I've already seen a couple people talking about how Kyle Pitts with Michael Penix will be better for a full season. Like that, there's still some name value attached to probably Hawkinson, Pitts, Laporta, definitely Kincaid to an extent. Mm-hmm. And then the guys that if you tell me they're healthy, someone like Evan Ingram, I can see people buying back in if his situation hasn't changed, but there's just not a lot of tight end assets. So
let me ask you this. Let's look at it from this side of things. What does a perfect tight end room look like for you in a 12-team Superflex PPR 1.75 for the tight ends? You're starting 10. Let's say it's 28-man rosters. How many tight ends do you want, and what does that look like? One hammer and then some threshold tight ends? Go ahead.
Obviously, everybody would take the hammer because there's only a couple of them. So if I have that,
I have all four of them.
You don't have one
for the hammers.
I'll just say this, then I want to get Shane's input on this. If you could somehow manage to get two tight ends that are, maybe you don't need the tight end 1 and tight end 2, but if you could get me 2 of the top 8, I think that does enough to influence the rest of the league's economy a little bit. And then all I have to do is essentially say, if I can find a couple free flex players that kind of come out of nowhere, I'll use them as flexes, but I'm not paying for flexes in the form of tight ends. Like, I'm not going to go, hey, I'll give you a second for Hunter Henry or Pat Freiermuth because they're going to give me 13 points per game in a 1.75 or a 2 PPR. I don't need to pay for that. But there's going to be a tight end. Like, let me give you an example from this year. K-Dot, Zach Ertz. Guess what they gave you? Like, that production. You didn't have to pay that. You could have got it even cheaper. There's a lot of guys. Mike Gesicki is another one in a 2 PPR. Like, he was a flex. If you'd have just started him, you got like 6 spike weeks out of him this year. So I think it comes down to, I don't want to pay for them, but if I organically find them, I'll be willing to roster a couple extras. But Shane, besides the hammers, how would you play it?
Yeah, well, just to that point, like, I don't want to pay for a top 8. So mind you, I will pay for the top 4. And probably Kittle, because he's probably the cheapest. Hold on. Brock Bowers,
Kittle,
Trey McBride, Kittle. Did I just add a 4th in my head?
And then it's Njoku.
I'll pay for those guys. But if you're telling me I have to pay for a tight end 8, or even like 20% more than I'm going to pay for tight end 15, I'm not going to do that. I'm not. I'll just take tight end 15, stick them in there and get a spike weeks.
What is the price you would pay for somebody like Kyle Pitts, Tucker Kraft? They're probably going to fit in that tight end 8 to 18 range. But doesn't that feel like the range? I don't want to pay what the dynasty manager with those guys that still see the fact that they're 25 or younger and they're only going to get better. These guys typically don't get better. They don't just come out of nowhere and get way better. You know, like maybe once in a while, but I don't want to pay for that range. I'd almost rather just dumpster dive with guys at the way bottom and just avoid paying for this range entirely. But I don't know.
Can I trade Kyle Pitts for Tucker Kraft straight up? Can I just do that and get out of the Kyle Pitts experiment?
Or you build a tight end into the trade where the tight end isn't even the focus of the trade. And here you get a recycling bin included as part of the package, something like that.
I think another strategy, though, that I kind of talked about on my roster construction series, like there's a lot of receivers in this range that are kind of redundant and not great either. You know what I mean? Like I could turn around and sell you DJ Moore and get back a random tight end, and I get back a second. And when I put Pat Freiermuth in my flex at a 1.75, I go,
just as much.
Wait a second. He scored 12.8 and DJ Moore scored 13.5. You know, they're the same thing, yet one has dynasty value because they are a receiver. The other is a tight end. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you look at it cross-positionally, that's when you start looking at this math and you go, wait a second, somebody actually likes Josh Downs, you know, but like tons of tight ends outscored him. Just an example.
But no. I don't even care about the players, but just as you're bringing this up, it brings up a point in my head. I don't even know if people look at the scoring for tight ends. Like they just assume it's 1.75, so a tight end is worth more. Like that's the default. It's any tight end they can find. They're like, oh no, this tight end's worth more. And you're like, dude, even in a 1.75, he's giving you 10 points a game. Like there's not some like magical, like it wasn't 1.75 on my roster, but when he's traded to you, it is 1.5. Yeah. I think a lot of people just default to that. Like, yeah, give me the tight end because I know he's going to outscore. It doesn't matter, player X, and they don't.
But don't you think people see through the offer? When I offer you Mike Gesicki for Hunter Henry in a third, you see through that offer, right? You see that I'm trying to get the free third.
Yeah.
But when I offer you Jamison Williams for Hunter Henry in a second, you see that as, ooh, I'm giving you a young receiver. You know, like the optics of the trade are different. So, I mean, I think if you're fishing in this, shoot me a receiver, Shane, that you know is not a difference maker, but is probably a good bet to give me 11 to 14 points per game. Throw out a name.
Jaylen Waddle.
That's not a bad one. That's a player where somebody sees him in a trade and you go, ooh, that's a young receiver. Like there's this thought of he's only going to get better if Tyreek Hill retires. Like all of these things where yet we look up next year and we're like, oh, Jaylen Waddle's nice. He's wide receiver 20. You know what I mean? And I could have gotten another tight end that in this format is close to him in production and gotten, hell, you might be able to tack on a 27 first for a third swap in a deal if you're willing to trade Waddle for one of these tight ends. So it's kind of like, I don't want to build my team around some of these like middling tight ends, but damn, if you can collect them on these process deals, you can actually flex them at a decent rate compared to the receivers that people still overvalue.
Shane, so looking at a startup, how are you approaching the tight end position in the startup? Say, first 12 rounds, where are you going to select and what kind of tight end is that?
So I'm probably not going to be bold enough to get Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, because I think you're going to have to. Matter of fact, I know for a fact you're going to have to draft those dudes in the first 2 rounds, and I'm not going to have the stones for that. If it was 2.0, I would, but 1.75, a little less so. So I'm probably going to end up in that Tucker Kraft range around the 7th round if he's still there. And if he's not, well, then I guess I'm going real dirty, and I'm taking Hunter Henry. I'm taking Mike Gesicki in the 10th through 11th through 12th round. I don't know. Will Tucker Kraft make it that far? Like a Tucker Kraft, a Mark Andrews. If they make it that far, sure, Mark Andrews won't. I'll grab them. I don't see, unless I trade it up and I'm doing one of my balls to the walls where I'm just making 6 picks in the first 3 rounds,
right?
Then I can get a tight end in the first 3 rounds.